I'm James Wagner for Professor It, and I have a question. Do the rich always get richer, or is it just my perception? Now, if you ask 100 people if they believe that there are some qualities that typify rich people, that those people just enjoy, well, most people would say that somehow there's a vast reservoir somewhere that was loaded with all the cash necessary to fill a wish list. The fact is that some of the richest people, including Donald Trump, have filed bankruptcy. Not because they had no assets, or even that their debts alone were as large as their assets. Often wealthy people are forced into bankruptcy because they're insolvent. What that means is they simply do not have the cash savings account to pay their bills. The failure to have adequate cash reserves is the single biggest financial challenge to every business in America. American families, as we know, save less and borrow more than any industrial country in the world. The amount of savings in this country has fallen from 14% of income in the 1980s to almost nothing in 2007. So as individuals, how do we get started on getting that big cash reserve that will help us to fill our dreams? In earlier episodes, we've covered the budgeting process and emphasized the importance of budgeting as a first step in the process. Here are a few tips that will guide us. But remember, we must put these into action if they're going to work. The best plans are worthless until they're put into action. Okay, so here they are. Set goals for your savings. You can never reach a goal if you don't have one. Specific annual targets for your account balances become an incentive to save, and by dividing the difference between your current balance and your target, you can easily derive the periodic amount you need to contribute. Simple enough, right? So to get started, open a savings account, even if it pays low interest. Set up automatic checking debits. Many financial institutions offer automatic withdrawals from your checking account into the savings account, money market, or other investment account. These automatic withdrawals are nearly as good as payroll deductions to make savings easy. Now, treat your savings like a bill. Pay yourself first. It makes perfect sense. Put your name on an account and a date to pay it, and make the payment when it comes due. Take advantage of company matched investment programs. This is very important. If your company offers you a matching contribution, it's like saying, hey, here's some free money, you want it? Of course you do. And here's an idea, save your loose change. I know that sounds silly to most people, but keep a savings jar, and at the end of the week, put your loose change in it. This can mean more than coins. It can be bills below any denomination you choose, like, well, let's say, for example, anything less than $10 or $20 bills. At the end of the month, take it and put it into the bank, okay? Next up, put a big do not disturb sign on this account. The idea is that savings accounts should not be confused as a temporary storage place that can be used to pay off bills or any other emergency fund. An emergency fund is important to have, but it should be kept in a separate place, separate from the funds for savings and investment. Okay, we're doing great. Let's keep going towards the ultimate goal, financial security. Once you get started, you'll be surprised at how quickly these seemingly small contributions add up. If you tuck away a little bill as, say, like $5 a day, the price of just one trip to Starbucks, by the end of the year, you'll have $1,200. If on top of Starbucks savings, you send yourself a bill each month for, let's say, $200, an amount that people in many parts of this country spend on utilities, you could end up the year with $3,600. And if you cash in that loose change before New Year's Eve, you'll be up to $4,000. That's really getting a good start on things. Investing. What do we need to know? Most of us would agree that the world we live in has become predicated upon quick satisfaction of our wants and needs. As a result of this conditioning, we take the same approach towards investing. We jump as some advice or investing tip that a friend has found success with, and because we've seen him as successful today, we expect the same quick results for ourselves. This is one of the biggest habits to avoid. The whole point of an investment program is to accumulate sufficient funds to meet your financial goals. So what is the most fundamental principle? The time value of money, also referred to as compounding of interest or the compounding of returns. In simple terms, We start with, say, a $1,000 investment that earns 8% annually, or $80. At the end of each year, we have two choices. One, we withdraw the $80 and enjoy a delicious dinner. Or two, we leave the $80 in our investment account. If we choose choice one, at the end of 10 years, we have $1,000 in our investment account and perhaps an oversized waistline. If, however, we choose number two, at the end of 10 years, we have $2,160. And as many of you who already understand this is how compound returns work. We are earning money on the money that we've already earned. The higher the rate of return and the longer we are earning compound interest, the more we make. We talked earlier about the benefits of financial planning so that you will have a target to aim for. To help ensure you meet these financial goals, you must have significant sums of money on a consistent basis. That one habit will do more to help you reach your financial goals than anything else. The sooner you start this habit, the less you'll need to save. Consider the following example. Fresh out of college and 25 years old, you decide you need $1 million when you retire at age 65. Now you can save on a tax-deferred basis through an employer's 401k plan and expect to earn about 8% compounded annually. If you start at age 25, you'll need to invest $3,860 a year for 40 years to reach your goal. However, to wait 10 years at age 35, you will need to invest $8,827 a year per year for 30 years. Still seems like too much? Well, consider at age 45. Now you'll need to invest $21,852 annually. That really is bad news if someone is waiting until age 55, because then you'll need to invest $69,029 annually to reach that goal. By postponing investment, you lose time, and with it, the ability to compound your returns on contributions to perform much of the work of attaining your goals. Let time work for you instead of against you. What's the best mix of bonds and stocks for you? Now we get down to my favorite part, actually looking at the optimal mix of investments, mix of bonds and stocks. A little bit later, we'll get deeper into each of these categories. The answer to the question is based on risk versus reward. For most of us, we would like to have high returns, say 20 or 30%, for example, but when it comes to risk, that's when all the fun stops. Reward without any risk is an economic contradiction. The question is not how much risk you're willing to take, but how much should you take? And here are some simple rules. The younger you are beginning your investing, the greater risk you should take. Investing involves multiple year cycles, and the less urgent you need for retirement or other income, the more opportunity to benefit from higher returns by taking greater risk. Professional investment advisors typically suggest a portfolio of 75 to 80% equities, 15% bonds, and 5% cash or short-term CDs for investors under 30 years of age. That's right. So if you're under 30, that's for you. On the other end of the time continuum, the reverse ratio is generally recommended for people as they're nearing retirement. That is to say, about 75 to 80% in bonds, 10% in equities, and 10% in cash or short-term CDs. What is important is that the investment process be reviewed annually and that over time the ratio of risk be adjusted downward to reflect your need to have predictable amounts of capital to meet unforeseen circumstances. Okay, let's turn to making the right investment choices now. Choosing the right securities today is much like going to a drugstore looking for the right soap or shampoo. There are literally dozens to choose from. Each will do the job, but which one is the best? Should we listen to the advertising, do our own research? How about sampling 2 or 3 brands? Now, once we've determined the right portfolio mix of bonds versus equities that's appropriate for our age and financial objectives, the process can become much more complex than many of us are comfortable with. It's important to understand the limits of our capabilities, not to mention the limits of our time. At this point, we may want to turn to more professional advice and management. Even so, making the right choices requires doing your homework. Now, the good news is that it makes little difference how large your saving is to get started. If you have as little as $1,000, you can begin. And probably the most important part of your decision is likely to be finding your level of comfort with your decision. Without that, you're inviting worry, and this takes all the joy out of the process. It's impossible to list all of the options here, but some of the tips on the choices available include the following. Mutual funds. Ideal for many investors with savings of up to about $500,000 who are seeking professional management can be measured in this. The industry has developed a fund for every conceivable type, size, and age of investor. The price of this professional management can be measured in the so-called load or sales charges. With some funds charging fees as high as 5%, it is understandable how the popularity of the no-load fund has grown. Now, there is no evidence to suggest that there's any material difference in investment performance based solely on the load factor. Now, another consideration for mutual funds is the fact that the availability of both bond and stock funds under the same mutual fund organization. Some organizations offer free transfer of funds within their organization. This can be a very convenient feature when adjustments to risk take place over time. Stockbrokers. And stockbrokers have gotten a bad rap over the years for a variety of reasons, some of them justified, others probably a little bit overboard. Historically, they've been compensated on the basis of commissions, which in unfortunate cases has led to what is known as churning, or the excessive amount of buying and selling of bonds and stocks solely for the purpose of generating commissions. And this is especially true where brokers have been given discretionary control over customer accounts. You want to avoid that at all costs. Unfortunately, the alternative is having a broker calling the customer to get approval for buying or selling of stocks and getting the order. Any of us who has ever gotten a broker's call at dinner time will appreciate the drawback of that approach. But in recent years, the industry has finally come to grips with a flawed system and has changed the role of the broker into the financial advisor. In reality, the new approach operates similar to a mutual fund, where the customer's funds are brought into and managed by the broker, in-house managers. The manager usually charges a fee for these services instead of a sales commission. The financial advisor receives a share of the fees, thus eliminating some of the traditional sales pressure. Now, this system shares the advantage of mutual funds that allow smaller investors to get started. Many of the larger firms have enough variety of investment styles to meet the needs of most investors in equities. But it is important, both mutual funds as well as brokerage accounts, to understand not only the style of investing, but the manager's record who will be handling your account. Look for absolute as well as relative investment returns. In other words, how long the manager has been running the fund, and importantly, how often has there been a down year. If you expect a positive return every year in your portfolio, you may need to adjust your risk profile. Even the best of managers have down years. One point of caution, though, we need to make about these brokerage services. You will want to confine your search to the larger and most recognized names in the industry. Many of the smaller regional and local firms do not have the breadth of service or continue to operate under more traditional practices. Finally, we're going to talk about private banks. Some of these private banks you're just beginning to hear about because they're advertising more and more these days. Once you have successfully created a savings and investment platform, you may want to look into the benefits of a private banking relationship. But first, you'll want to have a portfolio of, well, say at least $1 million. At one time, the J.P. Morgan was the epitome of private bank. It's located on Wall Street, just across from the New York Stock Exchange. Just to have a checking account with a Morgan name stamped on it made a statement of wealth. Today, virtually all of the large banking institutions have their own version of J.P. Morgan's private bank. Each organization has their own minimum asset levels, and to become an account holder, all you have to do is to find the list of services and prices for those services. While it's comforting to know that there's always some one person keeping a vigil over our wealth, no matter where in the world our ship may be sailing, there is no evidence that money managed by private banks has achieved better investment performance than other vehicles. Well, we've run out of time once again for this edition, but we really are just getting started. In our next episode, we're going to drill down into the often confusing world of the so-called tax-advantaged and tax-deferred savings programs, things like 401ks and stuff like that. So be sure to click on the next edition. I'm James Wagner, thanking you for joining us. I hope we've added something to your thought process concerning your financial goals.